Good evening, everyone. My name is Anup, and today I am going to take session on job skills mapping for data science job profiles. I have been working in this data science field for last 15 years. So let me start with agenda first. So today we are going to discuss a bit history about data science, like why and how data science become a sexiest job in 21st century. Then I will be talking about different profiles in data science. So maybe I can give you a quick brief about this profile. So we have different hierarchies, but let's start with data analyst, which is like first hierarchy. Then we have data engineers as well. You can consider us next in that hierarchy. Then we have data scientist, and then we have data architect, and finally we also have machine learning engineers. These are the various profiles I will be discussing about. We'll be talking more about what skill sets are required and what kind of salary compensations one can expect for those skill sets. Many of us know like data science is not new field to work on. Definitely data science word is new. This word become more popular sometime during 2011, when there was one paper claiming that data science will be the sexiest job in 2021. But as such, the concept of data science goes way beyond like 1950s. So during that time as well, we were involved in doing predictions or doing forecasting, like the forecasting of weather forecasting or oceanographic forecasting. So all of those kind of things were being done using statistical techniques. How this word data science rise, or how this particular skill set becomes so important nowadays. So one of the major reason is availability of more and more data. Now we had seen a paradigm shift in a volume of the data, velocity of the data, and variety of the data, right? Like so we have images, we have text, right? And we have both structured as well as non-structured text, right? So we have a lot of information available on Facebook, we have a lot of information available on Twitter, as well as there are many websites which basically having a digital information which very much can be accessed through machines, right? From the data perspective also, like storage of this data become much more easier with advent of new tools and techniques in form of big data technologies like Hadoop, Spark, or MapReduce techniques and all, right? So these were the major, like if I summarize this particular slide, then I'll say that the big data techniques, Hadoop, Spark, etc., along with infrastructure. So the kind of machines we are seeing now, like we can have a machine of from 4 GB RAM to 720 GB RAM and more than that as well. This is the kind of data we is available right now. Then advent of some of the programming languages, right? Like R language, Python language, and then adoption of statistical concepts or data science concepts in other languages like C++ or Java made these things much more easier, right? And now we are moving to deep learning. From last few years, like you will see lots of applications and lots of unsolvable problems before are becoming very much easier with advent of deep learning tools and techniques, right? With involvement of like infrastructure such as GPUs and TPUs. So these things becoming much more easier to work on. And that is why like we are seeing so many jobs of data science, or so much requirement is there in the industry of for data science jobs. So this is what I was talking about, like somewhere in 2011, this was the paper which was produced, which was titled as Sexiest Job of 21st Century. And Andrew Flowers, who is an economist at Indeed, he made this statement that the job of a data scientist has only grown sexier. Now let's look into various profiles in data science. The first step in a data-driven job skills or job categories is of data analyst. And after data analyst, we have AI ML engineers, and then we have data scientists. So maybe I can give a brief description or a brief connection between all of these three things. So data analysts are those which mine information out of data, right? Like so, like you have data, let's say like data of sales of a supermarket, daily sales or weekly sales data of a supermarket. So a data analyst is the person who will be mining information out of this data, right? And this information could be anything. This information could be like which product was sold in huge number last week, right? Or which two products were sold combinedly, right? Like milk and toast. or milk and breads may be two products which are sold combinedly, right? Or there could be many such combinations, like maybe from supply chain perspective, that how much the intake of one product and like how much of that product was sold in a one particular week. So all of these questions, related to operations, related to finance, related to marketing, related to sales, or related to supply chain or logistics, all of these questions are being answered by a data analyst. Now, coming to AI ML engineer. So we'll discuss more about these skill sets, like what exactly these AI ML engineers do. But I can talk about like the major role of AI ML engineers is to provide a platform where we can make predictions, or we can do forecasting, or in many cases we can do visualizations of the data. So basically, both the data scientist and data analyst will be using the platforms which are built by AI or ML engineers. And these platforms could be anything, like as I taught, like visualization tools. So that could be one tool which is being developed, right? And there could be other platforms, like once a data scientist build a model, it has to be productionized, right? So that production environment, like real-time predictions or real-time extraction of the data, right? Like or real-time gathering of the data, collecting of the information from inside sections as well as from third parties. That is what AI ML engineer will provide support to data scientist or data analyst. And finally, we have data scientist. Again, the role of data scientist is to, or I would say the primary responsibility of data scientist is to provide statistical significance on the different decisions being taken based on the analysis done by the data analyst. So let me give this example, that if a data analyst says that milk is one quantity which is being sold 10 times more than curd, right? One basic responsibility of data scientist will be to make sure that this hypothesis is correct in all of the scenarios, right? It should not happen that on week 15, data analyst is saying that milk is sold 10 times more than curd, and that becomes a goal for salespeople, right? Or for marketing people. So data analyst should be saying that yes, statistically, or this hypothesis is valid, is statistically significant, and we can definitely take decisions on this hypothesis, right? We can accept this hypothesis basically. This will be the primary job of data scientist, and then definitely there will be other jobs like forecasting. So I want to know that if data analyst is saying that in a particular week, if the number of milk sold is let's say 100,000 packets, then what will be the sales in next 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks or next month or next quarter? And even in some cases, like what will be the sale in next 1 year? So that will be the job of a data scientist. So we talked about those three families, like data analysis, AI, ML engineers, and then data scientists. Now, one common thing between those three job profiles is they are consumer of the data, right? Like they consume the data, like they are using the data to do next work on the data, right? But data architect and data engineers are the job profiles which are provider of the data, right? So basically, a data analyst, if they are needing a data, they will be looking for data in some, let's say, like in an Excel sheet or in a database or in a flat file, right? Like a CSV file or Excel file. Who provides this data in this format? So that will be very much role of a data engineer, and how that data should be structured, or how the data should be stored in a company's infrastructure. That will be the job of a data architect. So data architect will tell that whether we should be having a data warehouse or a data lake, or we should be having a OLAP database, like analytical database, or we should be having a transaction database, and also like what kind of tools and techniques we should be using for those data storage infrastructure, right? Like whether we want to use Hadoop or we want to use any other big data technique, whether we should be using DB2 database or we should be using AWS database such as Redshift or Debian database or Athena database, right? Or maybe Oracle database or so. All of these things are being decided by a data architect. Now, what data engineers do, they get into more specifics of how the data should be stored, basically working more on dimensions and facts, or whether there should be data normalization or data denormalization. So like they will be taking specific decisions that if the data is to be taken by a data analyst, then it has to be denormalized, so that like the complexities at a data analyst level should be reduced, right? Like they should not be dealing with lots of tables, like they should be looking into only one table, which is having all the information from maybe 100 different tables or 1,000 different tables. That is the primary job responsibility of data engineer. We already discussed some of the skills of these five most prominent data science related job profiles. So now we are getting more into more details of like what these job profiles are. So starting with data scientist. Data scientists are those who crack complex data problems, like with their strong expertise in certain scientific disciplines. So we'll be looking into other slides also, where I will be talking of more on their on the skills required. If I have to talk about like what are the four major components of a data scientist, right? Like what most essential components of a data scientist. So I can talk about four different components. One is definitely mathematics. So a data scientist is someone who is very much dealing with the mathematics part, right? Like they should be very much thorough with mathematical concepts. Not everything, but very specific to they should be aware of linear algebra. Second thing is definitely statistics. Data scientists should be knowing about different statistical concepts. So starting from central limit theorem, mean median mode, or different measurement techniques, different testing techniques. We have different hypothesis testing tools. So data scientists should be aware of that. They should be very much aware of probability theorems and how to use those to solve real world problems, right? So data scientists should be good statistics as well. So we talked about mathematics, we talked about statistics. Now third thing which is very much required is knowledge of a programming language, right? So it can be any programming language, like either Python or R language, or SAS language also, right? So data scientists should be at least very much proficient in one of these languages. And the fourth thing is like domain expertise. So a data scientist should be aware of the domain in which they are trying to solve a particular problem. So suppose if I want to solve, if I'm working as a data scientist and if I want to solve a fraud related problem for an insurance domain, so I should know that what kind of frauds are possible in insurance domain, right? Similarly, if I want to build a model to see if an advertisement will be effective or not, right? So I should be knowing something about the marketing industry as well. Like what are the keywords, what is SEO, what is SEM, right? What is the difference between paid search, paid campaigns, and organic campaigns, right? Domain expert is definitely the fourth strongest pillar of a data scientist. So now getting into more details of like what skills are required. So we already discussed it, but like maybe just a quick summary. Data scientist should be knowing about statistical concepts. They should be knowing about machine learning techniques and algorithm. Yes, sometimes this is a distinction between a machine learning engineer and a data scientist, that a data scientist may not have to get into details of the algorithms sometimes, right? But machine learning engineers may have to develop or remodel some of these modeling techniques as well. Yeah, from data scientist perspective, they should have an understanding of machine learning concepts. They should have an understanding of statistical concepts, right? The second thing is definitely they should be aware of one of the programming language, like either it can be R or Python or Java or C++. Third skill, which is not a technical skill, but which is more of a soft skill, is definitely communication skills. And it is very much required. Like you will not be working as in silos. A data scientist will be working very closely with the business team as well as with the technology team, right? In an industry, the data scientist will be very much closely working with the sales team, for an example, as well as with the technology team. So for example, I am building sales bot, right? Like which might be looking for different, like whenever a customer is visiting a website, it will pop up and it will talk about some sales stuff on that automatically, right? So for this, I should be knowing like what is the requirement of the salespeople. Do they, first thing is, do they require such bot or not? If they require such bot, then what they actually want in that bot? Then I should also be able to communicate my requirement to the software engineering team, because those people will be the one who will be productionizing your chatbot or your sales bot in the real production environment. Communication skills is very much required. The fourth thing is data visualization tools. So yes, like one of the major responsibility of data scientist is before getting into the prediction mode, they should be able to showcase like what the data is actually talking about, right? What is the historical data and what is the present data giving inference, like what information this data is providing. And one of the best way of doing this is like visualizations. So using histograms or using scatter plots or using pie charts. There are many other very good visualization tools. So using these tools, data scientists can convey this information very effectively. A data scientist should know about some data visualization tools as well. Last but not least, like they should be also knowing SQL, Hive, Pig, and other query languages. So this is important because most of your data will be in databases. right? And then you have to extract the data. You have to create a data pipeline. So to create those data pipeline, many of the times you can do it using Python language itself, but like it will be great if you know these other query languages as well, which are very fast. So now we'll quickly talk about roles and responsibilities of data scientists. So I was talking about, like, I started with that our data scientist major role and responsibilities. They should be able to apply statistical concepts and build the confidence of the business people, right? Like in taking decisions. So our data scientists, like, this will be the primary role and responsibility of a data scientist, but other roles will definitely be, they should be able to do predictions, they should be able to do forecasting, they should be able to mine the data, like visualizations of the data. They should be able to create inferences which can be useful for business people. Those will be their major responsibilities. If you are not working directly with a data analyst, then definitely data scientists will be having one more major responsibility of making sure that data integrity is there, like data is correct. You are not dealing with erroneous data. Data is complete as well. Like it should not happen that many of your data fields are 80-90% empty. And also the data which you are collecting, it should be reflecting correct information. So for example, like you are collecting age information, right? And age information, one problem could be that in the age information you have some alphanumeric values, right? A B C D or so. That is wrong, right? Other possibility is that age information is empty. So that is also not of no use, right? You should have, if that information is there, if you are collecting that information, then that information should be available as well. And third thing is, like, that information should not be erroneous. So for example, like age of a person should not be like 1000 or 200 or 250, right? Even 150 or 130 may be erroneous data. Or you should not be having a age of like -1, -2, -5 negative values, right? So those are erroneous data. That is also one of the major tasks of data scientists, that they should be making sure that data integrity is there, data is correct, data is complete, and data is available. Now looking into the salary trends, the numbers we are showing here, like the average salary of a data scientist is 113,000 US dollars and around 10 lakhs INR. So the source is Glassdoor for this salary trends. Definitely, there are many other factors which influence these salary figures. Definitely, industry is one of the major factor here. Like what industry you are working in. So maybe companies like Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, who are very much into advertisement industry, they will be having a different set of salary ranges, right? Other companies which are like IT companies, who are dealing very much with like applications in IT industry itself, they might be having a different salary range. And also it depends very much on experience as well. As you have more and more experience in statistics modeling, in machine learning modeling, and in deep learning modeling techniques, the better compensations you can expect. Now we'll quickly go through other skill sets. So data analyst is the next skill set we can look into. I'll quickly go through what the roles and responsibilities of data analyst is. So definitely, as we talked about, the data analyst, what they do collect data. They mine the data, analyze the data, and then they create reports. So it can be anything, like you can think of a weekly business report or a monthly business report, right? Or sometimes it can be a daily business report as well. Let's take example of Edureka, where like lots of students are attending classes online. What will be the role of data analyst is, so how many students register for the course and who really attended the class today. So this will be the information which will be data analyst, which will be mining from the data collected and creating report for higher authorities to look into. So these reports can go to marketing people, who may see that what kind of conversions they had. So they might had like 500 registrations, but out of 550 people attended this session, right? This is what the job role of a data analyst will be. Now coming to skills required, job of data analyst seems to be simple, but like from the perspective of skills requires, it's very skilled job profile, I will say. Like you should have analytical skills. You should be able to think what kind of information you can extract from a given data. Another, but the most important skill set is communication skills. You mine the data, but you should be able to communicate that inferences which you are generating from data as well very effectively to your stakeholders. Then critical thinking, like what kind of information you can draw out of this, out of the data which is provided to you. So data is just like, it's a matrix, right? Like where you have rows and you have columns, and then in all of these rows and columns you have numbers. How you can use this information, right? Like how you can like pivot this data to come up with useful inferences, and that will be part of critical thinking. Then attention to details, like what kind of information is provided, very much on like what kind of data is available to you. So I was giving this example of age. So if age is the column and it is having negative values, so the data analysis should be looking into those kind of details as well, right? Or let's say gender, right? So gender, what all categories of genders are provided, and they should not go with a norm that genders will always be having a 0 1 kind of either male or female, or 0 or 1 category. It could be other categories as well, right? Like, so that stereotype should not be there. Like there should be more attention to the details. Then definitely mathematical skills. So a data analyst should know the difference between what is median and what is average, right? Or if I want P95 information, right? P95 is 95 percentile. So instead of median value, which is 50 percentile, I ask a data analyst to give me 80 percentile or 95 percentile data. Then the analyst should be able to do that. And definitely then there are lots of technical skills, tools which a data analyst should be knowing about. So data analyst is someone who will be very much closely working with different forms of data. So it could be a CSV file, it could be a Excel file, it could be a database as well. It is very much required that data analyst should be knowing different skills ranging from programming languages such as Python or R, or querying languages like SQL, Hive, Pig, or big data tools and techniques like Hadoop or Spark, right? And then there are some proprietary tools such as SAS. So many of these insurance, finance companies, finance domain companies, or pharmaceutical companies, they have obligations. They have to use some of these proprietary tools like SAS or other tools, SAP analytics tools. It is very much required that data analysts should be knowing. They may not be experts in this, but they should know how to use these tools and techniques to get their job done. So next we'll be talking about roles and responsibilities. As we were discussing, the very first responsibility of data analyst is definitely to provide insights to different teams. Like it could be a sales team, it could be a marketing team, it could be a operations team. The receiver could be a data scientist as well as a project manager as well, right? Like who is looking for some specific information to take some specific decisions, right? That will be the primary job responsibility of a data scientist. Mine data from primary and secondary sources. So again, like a data analyst will be dealing with both data which is available inside their organization, but at the same time they should also be looking for information which is available outside the organization. For example, if I have to collect data for customers for credit scoring, for existing customers this information will be available in my organization, but for new customers I may not be having any historical information about these customers. So if these customers have any other footprints, if they have information of their credit history outside the organization, or maybe like information like what is their social media footprint, on which all social media platforms they are available on. A data analyst will be definitely like to distinguish between a ghost and a person, right? Someone who is not having any identity, but for a fraud purpose they are trying to log into your or register to your website, which is let's say a lending website, right? So now definitely a data analyst will be interested in seeing the footprint of this ghost outside of their organization. Like maybe if this person exists on Facebook or not, if that person exists on Instagram or not, right? Like that kind of information. Third responsibility, like providing a clean data and prune data is like you may have thousands of data sets, but not all those thousands of data sets may be important. So maybe you can just sample out some data for the analysis, and that can be used by stakeholders of data analyst. Definitely analyze and interpret results. I would say that will be the main responsibility of a data analyst. So if I'm giving a data to a data analyst, I will not be expecting a clean data, but I will be expecting like information out of it. Like I will not be expecting numbers again. I'll be definitely expecting a reason with some facts and figures. That is one of the core responsibility. And all of this related to reporting, like what all informations they can provide, new opportunities they can provide, visualizations they can provide for the management is what expected from a data analyst. Coming to salary trend, so average salary is low, as these are like first level of job profiles. Average salary in US dollar is 67,000 and in India currency is around 6 lakhs. Next job skill, data engineers. As we discussed earlier, so data engineers are professionals who basically who are responsible for the infrastructure, which will be used by data scientists or ML engineers or data analysts. In many companies, there are different job profiles altogether of data engineers, but in other companies, like software engineers are involved in building and managing these data environments or data infrastructure. Now, coming to skills required for data engineers, they should have a basic understanding of programming languages, and it can be any programming language. So Python is very much preferred language, but there are other languages as well which can be very helpful for data engineers. So Java or C++, those could be other languages. Then solid knowledge of operating systems, very good working knowledge of Unix or Linux operating systems, or even if Windows servers are there, Windows storages are there, or like if they are working on Azure or AWS, so they should be having a good understanding of these platforms. Definitely SQL and NoSQL, so they should be aware of these databases. Definitely any tools and techniques related to data. So Hadoop, Hive, Pig, Apache, Spark, Kafka, and then there are many other proprietary skills like for on AWS, S3, Redshift, EMRs, DynamoDB or Athena. A data engineer should be aware of all of these skill sets. It is not required, but it is expected that data engineer should also be having some familiarity with machine learning. So it is very helpful in the case when the request from a data scientist could be easily understood by a data engineer. These are the major skill sets required for data engineer. Now coming to roles and responsibilities, as we were discussing about data architecture, data architect will be discussing about like how the data infrastructure should be. The major work of data engineers is to implement that infrastructure, right? Like they will be developing and maintaining these architectures, right? And will make sure that this architecture aligns to business requirement. It is very much required that they should be able to make life easier of data scientists or data analysts, providing proper infrastructure, providing proper data sets, providing proper database informations, right? Proper access controls. The queries which data analyst or data scientist is running should not be taking a lot of time. All of this, like data engineers are responsible for helping both data analysts and data engineers, data scientists from this perspective as well. And definitely data engineers should also be taking care of reliability, efficiency, and quality of the data. So salary trends, we can see that average salary of data engineers is 110 US dollars. In Indian currency, it is 8.5 lakhs per annum. Now, coming to next skill set, which is of data architect. As we talked about, data architect is mostly responsible for designing, creating, deploying, and managing an organization's data architecture or an organization's data storage, basically. So okay, let's take example of Edureka, where we have lots of data coming in, right? Like, so this data is about students, and this data is about teachers or mentors, and that there is a data about courses as well. So we see that there is information related to students, there is information related to teachers, then information related to courses, then there is information which is required by sales, marketing, customer operations, like operations team, as well as requirement from media person, right? PR people. So all of this data, there is a lot of data which is flowing throughout their organizations. Like there is both inflow as well as outflow. So data is coming inside as well as going outside. For an organization which is very data intensive, what is the major responsibility of data architect is to basically provide data storage architecture, right? To say like to design or to create like how the data should be stored, how the outflow of the data should happen, right? Like all of this information, like there will be many consumers of the information. So for example, data scientists are one of the major consumer of this data, but then there are data analysts who are also major consumer of this data. Then there are operations guy, right? Like, or sales people or marketing people, they are also consuming this data. Data architect's role will be to how to make this inflow and outflow of data as streamlined as possible, right? And at the same time considering various other factors, like the cost of this data storage or data piling should be low, right? And the complication should be simple, like it should not be complicated. The solutions, whatever solutions we are looking for, it should not be complicated. It should be scalable. So today I may be having 1 terabyte of data with me, but maybe after 3 months I have 15 terabytes of data. So how to scale the existing solutions? So all of these decisions are being taken by a data architect. Skill sets of data architect. Definitely skill set I will say, or skills required is definitely domain expertise. Like many of the time understanding of the domain helps a lot to take decisions related to data architecture. What are different principles of database designing? So data architect should be aware of all of these principles. And I was talking about like experience of gathering and analyzing system environment, like experience of a particular domain, or even if experience is not in that domain, but experience in handling that kind of data is very much important to become a data architect. Other than that, definitely knowledge of data mining, like knowledge of databases, knowledge of query languages. Those are very much required for a data architect. So we talked about roles and responsibilities of data architect. So one of the major work which data architect are involved is migration of one database system or a legacy database system to new solutions. So earlier many people were having their legacy systems on, let's say for example, Oracle database. Now they want to move to cloud infrastructure, and cloud infrastructure of Oracle may not be right for them, so they might be want to move to AWS or Azure. So a data architect should be knowing about both of these legacy systems, right? They should be knowing how Oracle legacy system works, and they should be knowing how this new AWS cloud infrastructure or Azure cloud infrastructure works, right? So that is one of the prime responsibility of a data architect. Others definitely like how to improve performance of database access, right? I was talking about like if I'm running a query, then I'll be expecting 10 GB of data to be fetched in like 30 seconds or at max 1 minute, right? But if it is taking 15 minutes of time, then I may not be looking for that data into database. I may be wanting it to be just like in some CSV files, right? Like so data fetching should be as simple as and as fast as possible for me. Like our data architect should be taking all those things into consideration, like what is the requirement of the business and how best solution they can provide, at the same time being fragile. Like they should not be spending too much of resources on it, resources both from money and time perspective. Optimization, again the similar concept which I was talking about, like the queries should be running very fast, the storage of the data should be minimal as possible. Like so instead of storing data into a CSV files, maybe the data can be stored in a Parquet file, or maybe the data can be stored in cheaper solutions like S3 or so, right? So a data architect is expected to answer all of those questions. The most important thing, your database should be secured, and there should be backup of the database, right? Like our data which is can be accessed by other hackers or cyber criminals, that should not happen, right? So this data is actually a gold mine for any company, right? And people are trusting these companies to provide this data, trusting these companies that this data will not be used for any other purpose, right? So the database architect should make sure that this the data infrastructure that they are setting up is very secured, and a backup procedure is in place. So coming to salary trends, so you can see that salary trend of data architects are 110,000 US dollars, and in Indian currency it is around 17 lakh 55,000 per annum. Now coming to the last skill, which is of machine learning engineer. Talking about machine learning engineer and how they are different from data scientists. So I would say that data science, you can think of a data scientist to be a statistician who is having some computer science skill sets, right? Or you may say that a data scientist is 80% statistician and 20% computer science, right? You can think of machine learning engineers to be people who are having 80% of computer science skills and 20% of statistical skills. Now we can look into the skills required for machine learning engineers. So definitely programming languages is a must requirement. Then there are other requirements as well, like calculus and statistics. Other requirements like signal processing, mathematics, neural networks, and language processing. So these are some of the skill sets required for machine learning engineers. Roles and responsibilities. One of the major responsibility of a machine learning engineer is to provide a platform for data scientists to work on that, right? Like, and when I say from platform, it can be like a platform to provide a real-time predictions, right? So a data scientist may involve in providing a mathematical solution or a statistical solution or a machine learning model, but machine learning engineers provide a platform to run that model so that they can provide predictions on a real-time basis. That is one of the major responsibility of machine learning engineer. But other than that, machine learning engineers are very much involved in implementing appropriate ML algorithms and tools. So these tools could be like visualization tools, or these tools could be like let's say A to B testing of your machine learning model, right? Machine learning engineers are very much involved in that. They also provide systems if the systems are complex for building data pipeline, right? Like your data source is a big data source, right? Like maybe a database like, let's say, Redshift or Athena, and you are building your models in Python. So data scientists are building their models in Python. So like fetching this data from Redshift or from Athena and making this data available to data scientists is also one of the responsibility of ML engineers. So they provide this data pipeline as well, so that data scientists can focus mostly on the modeling part, and data scientists and take advantage of the data pipeline, work on existing ML libraries, see if that those can be optimized further. So many of the libraries are open source libraries. So ML engineers also work on like if they can use those open source libraries and modify them as per their requirement. So there could be many implementations which are not available in the open source implementation, or like which is available but it is not thoroughly tested. ML engineers make sure that when this open source libraries are used in the production environment, they don't break. So ML engineers will also be involving in implementing and testing these libraries as well, so that like there is no interruptions in the production environment. So talking about salary trends, so yes, ML engineer salary is around 120,000 US dollars, and salary is around 7,52,000 INR. So with this session on job skill sets, I like to end my session here. So thank you everyone for attending this session. Thank you all.